Say, this is Adam Gamal, and you're watching the Break
This
It
is
Down Show.
Adam Gamal. Welcome to the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, this is awesome. Adam
I
has
thought
written
you
a
were going to say
fantastic.
it.
Oh no, you're supposed to say it's all right. We're doing great. Look, this is the book, everybody. It's called The Unit. It's got Adam's name right down here. Adam is protecting his identity because he's done some very dangerous things in some very dangerous places. And well, for anybody who knows what we do around here, we talk about these kinds of things. So I really appreciate you coming in and working. We are basically the same age, and it's our in so many ways our paths are very similar, but from completely different origins. I was fascinated when I read your book about how you like there's so much cultural advantage. This is what I'm reading the book. I'm like, man, like what an advantage to have you on a team that's going to go abroad and try to defeat terrorism, try to stabilize a region. Because I had to learn all this stuff, right? I still don't speak Arabic very well, but I really it's crazy to me when we look at who our adversaries are and the areas that we're trying to stabilize, that in our early military career, the Army couldn't be bothered with Arabic, couldn't be bothered with teaching us about Islam, especially people in my line of work in Intel, like your line of work, Intel. Why is that? Why did we struggle to try to accept that we need to have this skill set, Arabic, Islamic competence,
Yeah.
all those things?
Yeah. So first, honestly, I wanted to give a lot of credit for people like you who went DLI or went to learn Arabic. It's not an easy language. It's extremely
Yeah,
hard. And for the longest, as you know, that in Arabic, we have too many different dialects. So for
yeah,
the longest, the military was teaching modern standard Arabic, MSA.
yeah,
And then it
yeah,
depends on your instructor in DLI, what dialect they might help you with. And then you go to the real world and nobody speaks MSA unless you're watching the news.
yeah,
So it's a shocker. So I do feel and respect and appreciate everybody who went through the training and really tried really hard to do the work. But you got to look at too, the military has a couple of challenges. One challenge is you have a lot of the immigrants, especially the Arab American immigrants. Some of them don't want to join the military.
mm,
So we have to do a better job in showing them this is not a war between the East and the West. This is whatever, when you join the military, you are serving your new country, that the country you chose to make it home, and you got to protect it. So that's one challenge to recruit the right people into the military.
yeah,
Then the other challenge, when you recruit somebody like that, like me, into the military, uh, get him, try to get him a clearance.
mm.
Uh, but I would like to ask you, how long did it take you to get your clearance? It took me 4 years to get my
4
clearance.
years. Oh
Four
man,
years
no.
to get my clearance.
Yeah, and please ask me questions. I want this to be a conversation. So the first thing I would say to you is I did not go to DLI. All my language capacity was self-studied. The military wasn't good at developing me either. And so they would say, like, hey, go to the motor pool, and I'm like, why am I in
Yeah.
the motor pool? That's not, we don't even drive these damn things. And so a lot of that time that I could have spent doing training, I was on details. I was trimming. I'm a counterintelligence agent, and they got me trimming hedges. Isn't my job hard enough that I need to be go out and doing something else? And so
So yeah. So by the way, I knew you didn't go to DLI. I just wanted to say DLI there.
yeah.
Because I
No, it's
wanted
a
to
great
talk
point.
about it.
Yeah, and
But
then I
I
was
wanted.
going to ask you at some point, like when you were speaking Egyptian Arabic, because I've watched my friends come through DLI and they're speaking MSA, and they're like, I have no idea what this country, because Baghdad Arabic is totally different than country ass Mosul Arabic, and then if you go north from there and a little bit west, all of a sudden you like. I knew native speakers that are like, I understand the words they're saying, but I do not. Like they were like, give me a minute to sort out what this guy's actually saying. So, how much trouble did you have translating all of the various sub dialects of Arabic?
So again, to give credit to the people who were trying to do that all the time. So it would take me time. Like first when I went to Iraq, it took me time. It took me like, a week or two. And then let me
Yeah,
actually give you a good anecdotal story here. I was in a deployment in a country in the Gulf, in the Arabian Gulf, and we were getting a lot of people talking about Monaco, and they were like,
mm,
did you, how much is Monaco? We want to buy
yeah,
one. We want to sell one. And I'm like, dude, these guys have a Monica is a Westerner female name. I'm like, do they have somebody that they kidnapped? We didn't know. So we would
right.
ask around, we would send like cables and send emails, and we're trying to figure out who's Monica that they're trying to sell. and it was a car. It was like the Mitsubishi Pajero SUV. It had it's big in the back. And no disrespect to anybody, but they in their mind, Monica Lewinsky had a big behind, so they named the car after her. So if you are a guy who don't have the interaction with the locals to talk, to chat, to kind of like pick a conversation, and you wouldn't be able to do that. And sometimes for somebody who's non-native to strike a conversation like this will raise a flag, a CI flag. So it's this hard, it's a hard balance to do. So to try to balance all of these things together, it's an art, and it takes a lot of effort. But even for me as a native, it took me effort to get there.
You're right about the car thing. I would try to understand it to like, no, this one's called the Ghost. And I'm like, no, that's a Jetta or whatever car it was. And all the cabs that were like, for us here in America, they'd be like a VW Scirocco without the sports back. And that was the cab vehicle. And they would call that a Brazili. And I'm like, why is that a Brazili? Well, they're made in Brazil. And so it was a whole, and you'll appreciate this. One of the guys I worked with, you have to have like quick, fast communication codes. And I'm like, what's a word that we can use that will be clear to you and I that all is clear? And he said, his name's Johnny Walker. He was an interpreter with the SEALs for a long time, wrote a book. He's in America now. And so we used the word dipshi, which is a northern Iraqi word for a watermelon and a very common thing to discuss, and because it has to be a common word. You don't say things like the hawk flies at midnight, because no one says that bullshit in real life. But if you're talking about two dudes like, hey, I want to pick up a watermelon. Oh yeah, watermelons are good. I'll get you one. Now we have a way to communicate clearly. And now it's also in a very specific word in the specific part of this specific country. So all of that stuff I had to learn. I didn't learn that in school, right? I had to learn that by talking to interpreters. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, but then I want to get back to interpreters and the way we treat the people that we partner with, whether they're in the military, with the military, or are hired from local population.
So let me highlight something here too. I'm sure you are familiar with the 09 Lima program.
Yep.
So in the military in 2004, 2005, I think, we decided like it cost a lot of money to have an interpreter contractor. It was costing us at the highest of it was over $300,000. So the military decided, you know what, let's just create an MOS called 09 Lima. We bring people who are natives. They just go to basic training, but they don't go to AIT, the advanced individual training. They just do basic training. And then we take them from basic training, assign them to a unit that is deploying, but keep them in Fort Jackson. So basically we created our own private company, put all of these 09 Lima guys in Fort Jackson and say, hey, just sit in Fort Jackson, and when we need you, we're going to take you, assign you to a unit. So just at that time, I was moving up the rank, but I did not hear about any of those guys till I was a sergeant major. And then I met some of them who came in as 09 Limas, and then they did a deployment or two, got their citizenship. Some of them changed their MOS. Some of them left the military. But the stories that I've heard, how they were treated by their units, was horrible. But I'm like, you know what? Because you did not integrate, simulate them, you have to put them in a unit. They become part of the unit. Like I've never dealt with anything like that, because everybody in any unit, I was in the 82nd, so people like saw me as here's a paratrooper, 82nd staff sergeant guy. He's just like everybody else. But if you keep those guys isolated and then just like use them as you need them, then you're not treating them like soldiers. Everybody, believe it or not, you put the uniform on, you treat him like a soldier, he'll act like a soldier.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I definitely am very unique in how I dealt with interpreters, because I recognized and I realized along the way my own various forms of prejudice, where I was missing things, and I needed, here a self-proclaimed expert. I'm like, oh man, how did I not realize this for years at times? But I would tell my interpreters when I got there, first off, the first thing I would do is I would say, you and I are going to go out. It's very dangerous work. If you don't want to do it, you can say I don't want to do it, because I'm going to work every damn day. I'm going to give you every extra time off. Like when it's just my work, you're not going to have to work. You can go relax, do whatever you want. But when the lieutenant, when the captain, when the colonel's like, hey, we're leaving the wire, you're leaving the wire with me. and we're going to grab information that no one else can get right in front of everybody else. And sometimes we're going to go off camp and have nobody else with us. And they would have to understand that. With that came a lot of trust from me. I'm like, you're gonna have to trust me. I'm gonna have to trust you. So here's what I'm gonna do. And I would open up their ability to leverage their culture and to leverage their language. So if I was talking and my interpreter did like this to me, he wouldn't physically do this. If he started ignoring me, I'd be like, oh, he's on something. Because I'd always tell him, if you sense something, if you know how to get it, I would let them run and get it. And this wasn't like we trained, we worked on this. This wasn't just a thing I did flippantly. And part of that magic was like, you're half of me, but you have to be half of the other person. And so there's things that I want to get. And you and I both know the worst way to find where the bombs are in town is to say, where are the bombs? And so I would say to the person, how do you do that here in Iraq? How do you do that in Afghanistan? And they would say, you never go in through the front door. You always come in through the back window, or some kind of analogy like that. And I'm like, well, when you sense that you need to do that, I want you to do it. I'll shut up. I'll take notes. Just talk to me so I can write down what you're saying. But you don't hear that. The other thing I would do is I would tell them, nobody's allowed to fuck with you on my team. You're my guy. You can go around and do whatever you want. Don't go anywhere you're not supposed to. But that's you can't really do that anyhow. And if anybody says anything to you, if they're derogatory, stop them, ask them what their name is, ask them what unit they're with, and I will handle the rest. If they don't allow you to go to the chow hall, if they fuck with you in any way at all, I'll have that ass. I'll go get it because I know the boss. And I'm like, you cannot do it. It's my job. And so every now and then, I would say like once a month, one of my interpreters would come up to me and be like, Pete, they did this thing to me. It was very negative and, all that. And did you get the name? Yeah. Did you get the unit? I'll be right back. And I would drop everything I was doing because that person needed to know that I had their back on the camp, because the camp for us, both of us, were dangerous because we brought a lot of bad news. And sometimes it's he was always being harassed by people who didn't know, usually lower enlisted people. But it was remarkable. But that changed in how I approached interpreters, like giving them the ability to help me understand what I could never understand. So like, it's not question, response. It's let's have this conversation. And if you need to run it, I'm gonna guide the whole thing, but I'm gonna give you a lot of rope to figure out where we need to be. And together we're going to find things out there incredible. And it worked awesome. I outperformed everybody around me because I gave the interpreter the chance to really guide where we were going.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I was lucky enough, I was never in any of those situations because, again, I had the rank and I was in JSOC and I was in the military, so I didn't have to deal with that. But I did see interpreters being mistreated, and a lot of them, obviously, because they saw something similar in me, so they would come and tell me.
Yeah.
And I did like you did. I mean, just like, I was like, these guys are fighting with us side by side. I mean, we had guys who are TSSCI cleared. And we still had people who didn't tell them anything. And I'm like, why are we paying for a TSSCI cleared linguist? And taking him with us, but we're not gonna tell him. But we're not gonna allow him to do his job.
Yeah.
I'm like, but we're paying a lot of money. If you didn't want to tell him anything, just go get like a cat 1 or cat 2 linguist, and don't pay him that much money.
Yeah. Well, even then, the cat 1, cat 2, you still have to respect them, right? So we had a guy who he wasn't an American, but he lived in America for 30 plus years. And so this kid was harassing him. And I'm like, hey, 1, shut your trap. Don't talk to my guy like that. 2, this guy's been a colonel's linguist. He's mine now, but this guy has done as much as anybody has. And he's been here forever. And 3, he's fucking older than you, has been in the country longer than you've been alive. Knock it off. This guy's a Jaguars fan. Who picks being a Jacksonville Jaguars fan? It's like this guy's as American as you can get. But it took a lot, man, to protect those guys. And here's the other thing that I noticed was because I stayed and the unit would roll in over the top of me. A lot of units did that, and they would completely ignore the interpreters. And so they'd bring their Lima in, and that person, some kid out of basic training who shouldn't be a colonel's interpreter for the most part. There's exceptions, of course, but these guys who were very skilled had their phone just connected to the world, and they had so much information coming through that phone, they'd be pushed back to the back. And I would do my best to be like, these are your top interpreters. You need to get these guys in front of the colonels who are going to go out and do things because these guys are connected. And I would go back to the interpreter lounge, the hooch, the house, or whatever, and I would talk with these guys. I'd play dominoes with them because I wanted to know what they found out. A lot of it's scuttlebutt, but that scuttlebutt is direction for me, where I can say, let's focus here, let's ask these questions. And just, it's a free machine for getting information out of if you just turn it on and listen to the damn thing.
Yeah, it's you have a resource with a live resource with a lot of access, a lot of information, a lot of cultural understanding, and if you're not taking advantage of the person with that skill set, you losing out.
In your book, towards the very end, you put a really great moment in there as you're retiring. You're talking about expressing tolerance, to your kids and everything. But tolerance is such a big thing. And you would think that guys like us who've seen the worst of humanity wouldn't have tolerance. But I always try to lean, like, if something makes me uncomfortable, something seems bad to me, it's not time for me to sit with that and figure out, how do I respond? Because if I respond emotionally, I know I'll be inaccurate in how I should behave and how I should work. So I learned that through my experience of being in all these countries and all these places and talking to all these families that had all these things. How did you develop that tolerance?
It's a really good question. When I came to the U.S., obviously you grew up in the Middle East. You have like any country, like imagine you grew up in the middle of nowhere in the US or in the middle of nowhere in Egypt or Afghanistan, wherever you grow up, you get a lot of you get affected by the culture around you. And obviously growing up in Egypt in the 70s and the 80s, and it's was a time where the Muslim Brotherhood were they were rising. There was a lot of political issues were going on in Egypt. They were trying to the government was failing on and off, and what's the easiest thing that to for a failing government? To blame the US. So at that time, obviously everybody was like, well, the US is bad in this and this, and it was raining today, so it must be the US's fault. It was hot, must be the US's fault. We just gotta blame somebody. So you come to the US and you have this mindset of like, what, some of these guys are bad. So I'm in a flight from Egypt. I looked like a kid. I was 20, and sat next to me an Egyptian American Jewish who left Egypt early during the Nasser regime, so in the 60s. His family got pushed out of Egypt, and the guy was extremely nice, and we had a layover in Rome. He talked to me. He's like, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And he took me, like held my hands and took me to the gate. He's like, this is your gate. This is where you're going to fly. He spoke Arabic. I didn't speak any English. So I go and then I land in the US, and I'm like, you know what? At the first day, and I didn't want to burn the book, but if you see it in the book, in my first day, a police officer, a bus driver, and a junkie helped me. And you start thinking. I mean, you got to be an idiot if you don't think. And then you fast forward a few years after, I'm working for one of the nicest guys I worked for. He used to own a ladies' sportswear store, and he was a Jewish guy. And I kept telling him the first couple of days, where are you from? Because he had an accent. And I think after a week, he's like, Habibi, I'm your cousin. He's a Jew-Israeli from an Iraqi descent. And you don't get any more different than that, like me and him. And we were so similar in a lot of things. The guy, again, I didn't look at his background. He didn't look at my background.
Right.
And we looked at how we can both help each other out. He's an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. He was in the US longer than I have. He has a business. I was a fresh off the boat guy. And you start thinking like, those total strangers are helping me out. What am I missing here? Then you start thinking more, and then you start, like developing this understanding of others. And then you start thinking, not because I was told this guy is my enemy, or not because my political belief against his political belief, he must be my enemy. It's not, if you're not with us, you're against us. It's actually, we have a lot more in common than we think if we just sit and talk and listen. And our country is going now towards this. It's either you are in this extreme right or this extreme left. And if you say, like one of Trump's policy was good, then you must be the devil. And if you say, like, actually Biden is not bad in doing this, then you're the devil. So we don't have this understanding anymore of like, what, let's just it's not black and white. There are a lot of different shades of gray, and we gotta be able to live in that gray. That's how I how I developed that tolerance and how I believe and how I've been living my life.
Yeah, and when you go abroad and you see how hard life is in other places, you realize that we need to shut the hell up. I mean, and these things are taken for granted to the nth degree. We can here in America, you can go to the bathroom, you can make waste, push a button, and drinkable water will flush your waste away. You never think of it again. It is a miracle in most of the world to have that kind of luxury where you can drinkable water, and it's so plentiful that you can turn it into wastewater and then never have to worry about it. That is, you and I both know that is so uncommon. Fresh vegetables any time of the year, like you can get strawberries any time of the year. That is decadent, and we lose track of how great it is here.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Let me take it a step further.
Please.
Having the right to have this conversation that you and I having, and take it a step further, having the right to dream. And that's what I highlighted in the book a lot, is coming to the US and feeling you can walk around, buy a house, and you say, you know what, one day I want to buy this house. And that's a dream. And you can work really hard and you buy that house. And I don't want to talk a lot about my current life, but I've been extremely blessed. Since I retired, I've been doing extremely well. And to highlight these two, like most of the proceeds coming out of the book go into veterans organizations and go into immigrants organizations.
Nice.
I'm making just very little money out of these, but I'm not making. I've been very fortunate. I don't need the money. I hate to say this, but this is more to inspire people and to help people out. But the reason I said that I came from Egypt with $500 that I borrowed, and if it wasn't in the US, I would have never reached where I reached.
Yeah. And the book is The Unit. It's written by Adam Gamal, who's sitting right there. And I recommend you guys get it. I just finished reading it a couple hours ago. It really is fantastic. And again, I understand who you are. And we've been talking about interpreters and stuff, but that's not really what you did. You worked in a unit so secretive, so classified, they call it The Unit. So you guys got to understand, Adam is highly skilled, super tough, and everything else. Counterintelligence is its own kind of special operation. At least the way I do it. I go run around with whatever SEALs or whatever battalion or platoon are there, and I go out every day, do my own work. And I tell people it's not uncommon for guys like us to have a 30-hour day and be like, okay, yesterday's over. Now that it's today, I've got to prep for our next mission. And it's all on us, right? The pre-mission stuff, the actual mission, the analysis, all of these things. It's on us to put all that work together. Talk a little bit about the pace of work for you throughout your career and what that looks like, so people can understand when someone goes abroad like we did, not only the risk, but just the pile of work that you have to take on to do the job well.
So I'll take it from the time I was in the 82nd. So in the 82nd, for a lot of people who never been there, they tell you when you are in airborne school, if you are assigned to the 82nd, they tell you just remember, every jump after that would be a night jump. So we do night jumps. So when you do prep for the jump, 8 hours before the jump. So it's T minus 8, and then you keep going, and then you jump, and then you have to walk 20 kilometers back. So usually days in the 82nd where you start at 6:30 in the morning for PT, and then you don't finish till 6:30 next morning. So that's a 24-hour day. That's just in garrison, in training to prepare for wars. Then we go to selection. When I get invited to selection for the unit, again, I want to take this opportunity to say the unit is not Delta. There is another unit called the unit as well.
That's right.
There are a few units because the names of the organizations are classified, so we say the unit. But then when I went there, in selection, they wanted to see how well you would do in real life. So part of selection, you are totally deprived of sleep, and you don't sleep much. You might sleep a couple of hours. You wake up on your own. You are doing a lot of things by yourself, and you work really hard to accomplish the tasks they are giving you. So in the selection, there are individual tasks and team tasks. So to protect the integrity of selection, I'm not going to go into a lot of details for that. But then fast forward and you deploy and you go on after a bad guy. And like you said, then the bad guy might decide to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you want it to be somewhere where you can actually monitor what's going on.
Yeah.
So there were days actually when we slept like 3-4 hours, days and days and days and days. And when I was in Iraq, I would go during the day to do reconnaissance during the day, and then I would be out at night. I was my first trip to Iraq. I was with one of another JSOC, one of the Delta units. It was me and 5 other guys from my organization. So during the day, I would be me and another Lebanese American who was assigned with us. We would go and do recon and prep where we're going, what are we doing, and all of this, like recce basically. And then in the evening, we would still go out with the teams for the hits. We are out with them on a hit. Either if they fast open, you fast open with them. If you go in a BMW, you're going in a BMW with them. If you're going in a helicopter or a little bird, you're going with them. So you're doing the same thing. So it's a mix. The unit is a mix of special operation and intelligence combined together. And that's that. Because of those skill sets, you have a lot of requirements and a lot of tasks to do, and that sleep becomes like a secondary thing. And the joke a lot of people used to say, you'll sleep a lot when you're dead. So just don't worry about it now.
It's true. You said another thing that resonated with me was how long it takes to arrive. So I would tell like my friends, like 72 hours, 3 days, I'll be home for sure. Maybe less than that. It'll take me about a week to physically recover from going from full warp speed work, traveling, and then arriving at home. Even when I came back into Iraq, I would have like an allergy breakout. My body would be like, oh, we need to put the Iraqi filter on. And so I would have this horrible, like 24 hours of feeling like shit, and having to deal with the different air, the different things I was breathing. My body would adapt to it, but there was like all that stuff. And then it took me, I would say, 4 to 8 weeks to fully arrive. Like by the time my leave was over, my 2 weeks of leave, I'm like, I have just now settled in. It is now time to leave, And so I don't think people understand like how badly you want to be there with your people because you're not pulling your weight, but you also need to take a break so you can continue to pull your weight. Talk a little bit about that arrival and what that is like for you, for your family, for the people around you, and how did you learn to deal with it?
So it's one of those, your brain plays with you sometimes. So I used to think like, okay, you came back from a deployment, but you didn't come back. When did you arrive? And that's what I meant by that is you are home, but you're not home. You have your mindset on the mission. You have it's like an on switch and an off switch when we were deploying. We deploy in different capacities. So you might deploy this time with the military. You might deploy to a non-war zone. And people think non-war zone is fun and it's easy. It's not either. And then coming home, your family doesn't. You're gone a lot, and your wife or your significant other has a routine already. She takes your kids to school. She feeds them. She does this. She does that. She works. She goes to school, and she has a system set in place. And that system, for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you were not part of it.
Right.
And then when you come back and you try to be part of it and you try to force your way into it, but you shouldn't, because that system is being running smoothly there. So you sit and you're trying not to force your way in, but then your family still, they are like, are you here or not? So to learn when to say I've arrived, whether to a mission or back home, you have to really, really slow down. You have to spend some time by yourself, alone, to think of what does it mean to be home. And being home means doesn't mean that I have to take my kids to school every day, because if my wife was doing that, maybe she's comfortable doing it. So that having that communication with your significant other to understand what they want. Obviously, I didn't get it right from the first time or second time.
No.
It took me time to learn, and it took a lot of communication with the wife. And the wife was like, usually you come back from a deployment and you're not yourself for a while. So that's a really important thing for guys who are deploying now with the military, whether with this special operation command or not special operation command, to have the self-awareness that when you are home, you're not home yet.
Yeah. One of the questions I love to ask folks in our line of work. Well, first off, what would you say your job title was in your military career? Like, I know for sure we have a title. I was a counterintelligence agent, right? But for me, I was really a combat spy. I went out and I left. That was what I became great at. And in our field, I'll say in the counterintelligence field, you could have 150 different jobs. So there's me and I don't know a couple other guys maybe have done it as much as I have, and so it's its own unique job. So what would you say your unique job was in the military?
I would say honestly, it was all the guys in the organization. They are problem solvers. They solve very hard problems
Yeah.
that requires a lot of different skill sets, and you cannot do it on your own. You have to have a team. But I would say like problem solvers.
Mhm.
Obviously, for anybody who knows about the organization I came from, it's an intel special operation organization. So it's a join. It's a mix of it's a blend of special operation and intelligence
Yeah.
collection, and intelligence collections by all the meaning of the word.
Yeah, when I try to describe to my friends what I would do, it's like I work in the seams, and really what I tried to do was I tried to communicate the Americans to the locals and the locals to the Americans. And I had to be relevant in both places. So I had to know the commander. The commander had to support me. I had to make sure the sergeant major liked me. Because the sergeant major doesn't like you, you're a problem, and that becomes a problem. The staff had to know that I was on their side, and that's just on the camp. And then all the different relationships I had. So I was as busy on the post talking to different people because I didn't have a big commander above me somewhere. I was really a free agent, and so I had to sell myself to these units, and that took I don't know fully like almost half of my time was spent getting us to be better at what we did, to make fewer mistakes. I always say like I had four jobs, right? Was to help the commander win, help the commander lose less, help the enemy lose more, and win less, right? And if I could do all of those things in a day, man, I was killing, right? And so I spent a lot of time on getting us as an organization to go in the right direction. That doesn't sound like espionage, but the reality is I'm giving the commander information he needs. I'm looking over the mountain, going, okay, here's what we got to do, and then the commander's like, yeah, okay, I know how to run my machine now, and they would tune their thing. So that capability that we have, that problem solving capability, like, hey man, the ag team is going out and all they're doing is fucking up. They're not helping you accomplish your goals. Nobody wants to hear that except for the commander who's desperate to get these things right. So that's sort of how I did these things. And I don't want you to get obviously in anything classified, but let me ask you this. When did you get good? When do you think like, oh man, I know the pace of all of this work. I understand. I can anticipate problems. I can avoid those. How long did that take?
Uh, it's a very good question. I think you always, I mean, no, I think I know you always have room for improvement. You always learn.
Yeah,
So you never get 100% good at it, because once you
sure.
think you are 100% good at it, it's time for you to quit. It's like they tell you in airborne school. When you totally not scared of jumping, you need to quit because you become dangerous. But I would say I think after my third or fourth deployment, I started feeling okay, like because I've done combat zone, non-combat zone, and then another combat zone, then another non-combat zone. Then I think that was the fourth.
Hmm.
Uh, and then you start thinking, okay, you're going to work out of an embassy. And exactly like you said, you go in somewhere and people are like, we don't know what you're supposed to be doing. We don't know if you should be here. As a matter of fact, we don't want you to be here
Yeah,
because you are a JSOC guy. And JSOC means you're going to go kick doors and kill people. That's what's in their mind. And when
yeah,
they used to see me, they'll be like, okay, that's not what we expected. So that's the first icebreaker.
yeah,
And then communication and winning hearts and minds is an art. And believe it or not, in our field, you win hearts and minds of the enemy, and the guys basically outside of the wire and the guys inside the wire, like you said. You
yeah,
want, like if you're working out of an embassy, you want the regional security officer in the embassy to feel comfortable with you. You want the defense attaché to feel comfortable with you. You want the
yes,
station to feel comfortable with you. You want the ambassador to feel comfortable. So you
yeah,
try to win all of those people. So I think it took me like 4 deployments to realize, and working with really, really good people that I deployed with, And
Yeah.
I'm a really good observer. So I used to observe, like, how did this guy do this? How did he do that? Look how he said this to the ambassador. Look how did he talk to the defense secretary? And
Yeah.
then you learn those things. But I would say at least 4 deployments till I felt like, okay, I can be on my own and
Yeah.
feel good about what I'm doing.
And again, we're working within the same organization, but in different spots, but at the same level for people to understand this. So I'm working in more of a traditional Army unit for the most part. I might go augment a special forces team or a SEAL team, but for the most part, I'm trying to help the big Army be better. And the first thing I would do when a new unit came to me or I arrived on a new unit is I just watched their briefings, and I would see their slides, and I'd be like, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. And I could just identify where I needed to help these guys internally. And when I go out, of course, I'm going to talk to the locals and I'm going to bring them information they didn't have. But if I can get the unit, my unit, not your unit, if I can get that unit going in the right direction a little bit quicker, even just by like 2%, because I can't do their job for them. They have to do all of the big work, but I can kind of help them tune where they're headed. That makes a big difference. And then if you happen to find dangerous information out, and this is the thing that I think you'll get this. If I'm out on a patrol and there's going to be another intel guy somewhere, because there's some kind of human collector, right? And if someone's like Pete, because I always went by my name, I'm always Pete wherever I go, so that wherever I encountered anybody, I would be the same person. I didn't want to have to keep track of all these legends, and I always just wanted to be straightforward with what I was doing. They'd say, Pete, there's a man with rockets that's going to attack people. I'm like, you need to talk to Chris over there. He handles that. And so I avoided threat almost altogether. But because I did that, the locals trusted me enough to bring me threat all the time. And so I would just divert it over towards the Army that's much more focused on that. And I would continue to focus on the bigger, more strategic collection pieces because no one else did. And just I know you know this, but when you go into an operations center, you're going to see how the Army communicates or the military communicates. And it's all going to be threat. Who's the bad guy? Who is this? What accident happened? What tragedy happened? What thing happened? And I'm like, where is the non-threat stuff that actually drives the community? Like who's the most important farmer? Who's the biggest businessman? All these other people that we ignore, I'm able to meet those people, and they know all the bad people anyhow because they're connected and they're important.
I was in a deployment and in one of those like very high CI threat country, and the car rental guy I was renting the car from, I was there for a while. I built a good relationship with him. I have other guys come in to the country, so I went to the guy and rented cars for them. The guy he liked to drink, so I would get him some drinks.
Yeah.
And after 3-4 months, the guy comes to me and he's like, hey, when we rent a car to you guys and we take it a week after for service? I said, yeah. He's like, actually, when we take it because the security service asked us to bring the car to bug the car. And that's a local guy telling me that.
Yeah.
And obviously, we always, as you would know, we always would suspect that. We always operated under the impression if it's a rental car. So then I tell the guy, I'm like, why would you do that? And then the guy gets in this conversation. The guy, obviously, he felt, he connected with me enough to tell me the security service of that country are bugging our cars. And that's based on just based on the relationships that I created with the guy, like just the stories that you were talking about.
Yeah. And it's amazing what you can find out by going to the barbershop, just like here. You're going to find things out, and they may not have anything to do with what you're doing today and right now, but there's so much context in those conversations. And this is the story I always use for this. The colonel said, hey, Pete, take out Lieutenant Jones and help me figure out what's holding. His relationship isn't going well with the Iraqi general that he's talking about. I'm like, first off, boss man, you got lieutenant and general, that don't work. So we go out and he might have been a colonel, but either way, high ranking guy. So we go out, it's later in the afternoon, and all of the Iraqi Army people are sitting around a TV, and I'm like, what's up? What's going, Shaku Maku, what's going on? And they're like, it's Arab Cup. And Iraq is playing, and the lieutenant's like, let's get to work. And I'm like, our work today is watching soccer, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, don't bring business up at all. Just go be a partner, be someone who's excited about fucking soccer. And it blew his mind that he couldn't just lean forward and fight. I'm like, you're fighting by watching TV.
Yeah, I so all of these skill sets and all the travel, I was blessed to travel with the military. uh, it helps me with my current work now. So I do consulting and I do travel a lot. And I go to some countries, and like you said, I mean, I'll go sit with a guy for 3 hours just drinking nothing, drinking tea and talking about listening to him.
Mhm.
Listening is an art. So I'll just sit down and listen to the guy, and he tells me about his family, tells me this, tells me that. So the intelligence business and their normal business, they are very 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 similar. If
Yeah.
you just listen, and everybody has a need, whether a guy works for a phone company and he wants to please his boss, he has a need. He wants to get
Ah,
promoted. He wants to make money.
yeah.
And if your project in business gonna give that guy the opportunity to shine, why not?
Yeah.
So give people the opportunity to shine, and you will achieve your goal. Whether you are in the military doing what I was doing, or you are in the private sector.
You talk in your book about cultural training and how the military doesn't do very much with like don't show your feet and all that kind of stuff. And we're doing such a terrible job at this. I learned so much from the locals, so I didn't worry so much about giving offense. I would just say, here's like, for example, I would go in and you're sitting on the floor and they put all the food on the floor and we're eating with their hands. As you know, this is a very specific thing that you don't do in the city. And I would say, and you get to do this. I'm from California. I eat with my left hand. And they're like, yeah, Pete, it's fine. You're from America. We know you're not from around here. You're our guest. And of course, we understand you have different customs. So you're totally fine to eat with your hand. And one of the guys said, he's like, here's another thing that you Americans do. You want to drink a little bit of my chai and then you want to start working immediately. He's like, try not bringing up work until I do and see how you do. And I was like, oh my God, he just unlocked this like big old room full of opportunities. And so I took that. I was like, yeah, I won't bring up work until they do. And just like, and look, you have to always put the thing like, I'm not ignoring risk, I'm mitigating risk. But when I go talk to the Ministry of Education for a province, I say to them, hey, yeah, you're the boss around here with education. I'd like to have a meeting with you. What's the best way to do it? Do I come to you? Do you to come to me? And then they would say, yeah, here's how we're going to do this. And they would set it up, and they had a planner. And they're like, it wasn't inshallah. It was like, right around 1 o'clock, I'll come get you. We'll drive you over to my office. We'll have our meeting and we'll be there for 2 or 3 hours. Then I've got to go do other things. But so that whole approach of saying, let them determine what safe is, because it's a government person, and let them determine when you wanted to start bringing up business, and never make it about me, never make it about my ego, and just allow that relationship to be driven by them. And sometimes just listening, like you said, hearing somebody go through like, oh my God, damn kids, everybody has that conversation. And when you let them offload that stuff, you create an affinity by, I don't know, by just shutting up and listening to what's going on with them, and understanding.
Yeah. So one thing too I wanted to highlight here. We have a lot of people when I used to say, or I say now, let's make sure we understand culture. Let's make sure that we win hearts and minds. And people see that as weakness, or people see that as I'm overemphasizing the value of understanding the culture. It's quite the opposite, actually. It shows a lot of strength. It shows a lot of
Yeah.
you're very strong if you can win a war without fighting a battle. So it's more of it's a strategy, it's a technique. It's you have to be smart enough to move in every direction. And when I tell people that you need to understand the culture, it's not me calling anybody ignorant. It's quite the opposite.
Correct.
I know the guys who go to take the training, the guys who go to DLI. I just what I tell people, like, hey, make sure that you try to understand it more. So when you are dealing with somebody, but we have people who just they see like, well, I'm American and I'm gonna go speak to you in English, and I don't care if you understand or not.
Right.
Or I'm gonna, I'm American, so it's gonna be my way or the highway. Well, that's how we lost a lot of opportunities in Iraq.
Yeah.
That's how we messed up a lot of things in Iraq. That's how we created, by the way, we opened the door for a lot of extremist organizations to recruit based on our lack of our misunderstanding, or our and our we took a lot of wrong steps in Iraq. When I would go out and I hit with some of the other teams, and you see like a 70-year-old woman, and they're gonna put her on her knees and put a bag over her head and handcuff her. And I'm like, guys, she's not a threat to us. And they
Yeah.
were like, well, we don't know. And this is how we gotta do it. And So I told the guy one time, I said, imagine that I asked the guy, where are you from? And he's like, I'm from Texas. I said, well, imagine somebody comes to Texas and does that to your mom. What would you do? He's like, I'll kill him. I said, so now he told her kids to kill us one day. So we were making terrorists faster than we can handle them. And that's one of the things that I was trying to put emphasis on, understanding culture. Again, not to say, I mean, we always have room for improvement. The military teaches you always improve your foxhole. So if people are not willing to listen to the expertise, not willing to listen to people like myself who have the experience and proven success in the military, then there is a bigger issue that we have, and we're just gonna insist on doing things the wrong way. And I'm like, well, if we keep insisting on doing it the wrong way, how do you expect that you're gonna change the world?
Yeah, it's so true. A friend of mine was a commander in the Marines, and he was talking about how they would, knock on a door and take over that house for the night. And I'm like, man, you don't understand. Like, I know that's what the Marines do, and I'm not saying don't do it, but what I'm saying is you just invaded someone's home with a platoon, a company, a squad of Marines, and you took over their life, in a place where there's a war going on. You can't just do that and expect that not to have a negative ramification. And it was like he'd been struck by lightning. He's like, I'd never thought about, like, I'm a dad. I've got a family. And if a unit showed up at my house and forced me to bed them down for the night, I'm like, yeah, that would be unconstitutional, first off, here, because he wouldn't be allowed to do it, right? And he's like, oh my God, I never thought about the cost of that and what you do to mitigate it, because you have to do it. Okay, great, that's how you operate. But that understanding the damage that we create. And you said something else too. We talked about the cultural piece, and then I'm going to shut up and let you talk. But if we can use their cultural path, and it's not comfortable for us, but if we allow their path to be the way we get to our solution, A to B, I don't care how it wiggles, just get me to B. And if it's their way and it works, then we're just going to do it that way so that we can accomplish the goals and force less of us on them, because we are their guest of sorts. We are the occupier of sorts. And so that cultural path recognition, it's uncomfortable. It's hard. We don't train on it, but it is the better path.
I mean, we have like, public affair guys. We have the PSYOP guys. I mean, we have people who are trained for those things. Just that what I was talking about in the book, that we're not training our general population. And in the war in Iraq, we ended up having like, a company of NBC soldiers guarding our prisoners because there was no weapons of mass destruction, in case people didn't know that yet. But we figured this out very, very quick when we were in Iraq. So all the NBC units didn't have a job, didn't have a mission. So we gave some of those people were became prisoners. I mean, guard prisoners. So we had some an NBC unit that were guarding our detainees. And again, you're talking to an E4, 19, 20-year-old, never been outside of the U.S., and they are guarding Iraqi prisoners of wars or detainees, like Rumsfeld called them at that time, to open the door for other things. And everybody listening can understand that. So at that time, those young soldiers who were never trained, we accused them, like what happened in Abu Ghraib.
Sure.
We put the blame on the young soldiers who really did not have a clue. I'm not saying what they did was right. I'm just saying they were not trained to deal with a situation like this. So you bring young guys and girls and you put them in charge of guarding prisoners, but you never trained them. You never told them how to do this, and then you expect them to behave right.
Yeah, I was in Iraq when that all went down, and the first belief was that the contracted or the Army interrogators were the ones who were doing this, and I'm like, that's absolutely not true. There's no way that these guys are too professional, because these are my sibling MOS, and also the contract that I was working at the time, they're like, hey, everybody's got to go through Abu Ghraib first, and I'm like, I'm not an interrogator. I can interrogate, but I am not an interrogator. And so I did my damnedest to avoid that place, because you don't need me especially me, what I do. You don't need me in a detention facility. I need to be mixing with the locals. But there was so much there was such a lack of training. You're right. It created a real problem. And just in general with Islam and everything else, there's so many times where we got our asses handed to us because we didn't understand the religion that was there in the area.
Yeah, I was in Iraq at the same time as well. So yeah, and I were in Iraq at the same time. And I was a frequent visitor of Abu Ghraib. So we used to go back and forth to Abu Ghraib, either to hand over detainees or to
Yeah.
question them. And it was a mess. It was a total mess.
Oh,
But to go back to your point too, like the lack of understanding of you gotta like Sun Tzu in his famous book,
yeah.
The Art of War. He said you gotta know yourself and know your enemy, right? And how could we go fight a war not knowing the enemy? And you'll see it in my book. Some of the guys we were able to take out, we took out because I knew what time they're gonna pray, where they're
Yep.
gonna pray. So I was able to predict where they're gonna be, when they're gonna be in certain areas, and we were able to interdict them there, or we were
Yeah.
able to do something. And this is just again, you gotta know you're going to fight an enemy, you don't know their language, you don't know their religion, you don't know their culture, and you go in and you're trying to say, I'm gonna win their hearts and minds to take out the bad guys. I'm gonna win the hearts and minds of the majority to take out the bad guys. And we didn't know. I mean, a lot of guys didn't know that. So I hope the book gives people some insight. I hope people can benefit from the book and learn something.
Yeah.
I got feedback from some of my buddies and Navy, Army, uh, and Marines. So I got from
Yeah.
the three services. Didn't get anybody from the Air Force talk to me about it yet, but at least those three services and the three of them saying like we would love, we wish we learned these things when we were in basic training.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
one of them recommended that book to be a mandatory read for basic training.
This is the book. It's called The Unit. It needs to be 100% right. There's the link down below. You guys can get that. And for sure, if you're in the military, you want to understand better, like how to see the cultural stuff. Look, there's the war stories and all that stuff. Adam gets shot. Okay, great. Well, who cares? What really matters here is how you deal with religion, how you deal with interpersonal communication, how you deal with your own interpreters. All this stuff is packed in there. You talk about diversity in a way that's healthy and not corrosive, and it's just fantastic. I want to ask you two more topics before we get out of here. One is in our line of work, and people ask me all the times. I do interviews myself, and they'll say, "Weren't you scared?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm a pro. Like, I'm not allowed to be scared. Yes, my job is. There's no more dangerous job than our job, but you don't have time for fear. Like, fear is it's just inhibiting. So I accept it. I always look down at my shoes, and I'm like, all right, I'm on the ground right here. This is now time to pee." In combat zone Pete. He's a different guy than who's on the camp. He's a different guy that lives in California. So there's that aspect. And then the other thing is because we have to accept this risk and because I have access to people, I am trying to find the nastiest, meanest person, most illegal, most dangerous person around. And I'm trying to get them to calm down or even flip them and get them to be our asset potentially. Right. And so again, not afforded the luxury of safety. I'm not an NBC guy running a prison facility. I'm a guy who's trying to get off the camp as often as possible and also be allowed to stay on the American camp because the Americans kick me off camps all the time too because I've got bad news a lot. So talk a little bit about that balance of threat and trying to get close to the bad people you have to get close to so you can have an impact on what they're make business bad for them.
So you always have to have what I call a healthy fear. You don't want to be totally like reckless. So you want it. So I always had that in the back of my mind.
Right.
If I get detained or if I get captured, what will happen? And for me, the fear was like double because again, if you are in an Arab Muslim country, like if I'm in Afghanistan, which is not an Arab country, I know that. But if I'm in Afghanistan and I get like taken capture, and you and I get taken captured, so they're gonna look at you like, well, this guy is fighting for his country.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're not gonna see me as an American the way they see you, and they're gonna be like, well, this guy is one of us, and he's selling us out. So I had that fear there all the time, which is like I said, it's healthy fear. It's not like you said, it's not an inhibiting fear.
Right.
Having that fear, and then you learn with your training, with your a lot of the training we did was just like you control your fear, even jumping out of an airplane. You control your fear. The first time I jumped out of the I think it's like a 30-foot tower in Fort Benning, which is not very high, but you look down and you see the ground. I was scared. But when I jumped out of 35,000 feet, I wasn't as scared because you didn't see the ground, so it's far away. You didn't see it. But that fear there gets you to make sure that you do your stuff. You check in yourself once, twice, thrice. You check your surrounding. You are aware. So that's how I was controlling the fear, to make sure I'm not making a mistake. And then how to get close to where you want to be yourself. Just be very natural. Like I'm a very natural guy. I'll come and I'll walk to a bar in, I don't want to insult or offend anybody, but let's say Waco, Texas. I'll walk to a bar there, which people don't look like me, and I'll shake everybody's hand. And I have a good smile in my face, and I'll make you feel very comfortable.
Yeah.
I'll walk to a church in Lebanon, and I'll do the same. I'll walk to a mosque in Saudi Arabia, and I'll do the same. So I have that. I've been very fortunate and lucky to have that easy, adaptable, going personality where I can make people around me feel comfortable, which in return it gives me security.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to say my job is to be Johnny Goodtime, so I'm
Yep.
smiling, I'm waving. Hey, how are you? Oh, I'm from California. And if I get them talking to me and asking me questions about California, that's protecting me. And people don't understand, like, that's why I'm Johnny Goodtime. And I was working with an American colonel. And we were with his partner, who also was a colonel, and it was Ramadan. And my colonel and I were talking about, like, how do I teach my soldiers how to deal with Ramadan? And I'm like, you ask the person that you're talking to. Don't ask me. Ask the Muqaddam, the colonel. And so he's like, well, show me how you would do it. So we sit down, and I say to the colonel, I'm like, it's Ramadan right now. By the way, everybody, Ramadan Mubarak. But right now we sit down, and I say to him, hey, it's Ramadan, and we always want to be respectful of your religion. So I've got a canteen of water here. I'm not going to drink it because that's kind of what we think we need to do. But I'd rather you tell me, how do you do Ramadan? And he's like, Pete, I love when they call me Pete. That's a good sign. He's like, Pete, Iraqis aren't all that religious. And you've probably heard this. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that. He's like, so, like, if you were to say, and it didn't say the exact words, but he basically says, so if you were to say, hey, Colonel, do you have any whiskey? I'd like to do a shot. I would open this drawer of my desk and I would pull some whiskey out. We would have a drink. So do you want a drink? And then I said, of course I want a drink. And then my colonel looks at me like, what? Are you going to drink during Ramadan with this guy at work? And so I got up and I went over, because anytime I'm offered a shot in a combat zone, I take it, because that's part of being human, in the humanity that's around you.
Yeah, it's again, you did it best. You let the guy lead, and you followed his lead, and you made them comfortable, and you're like, and again, you ask, right? Because a guy might be like, no, I fast and I'm not gonna touch it. Like another guy would be like, let's have a drink. It's like dealing with anybody. Humans are humans. They have the same needs, they have the same desires, and they want to connect with other people. Once you make them feel that they are like you, they're not inferior, and you guys are like on one team, they'll surprise you.
Hey, your book is fantastic. I loved reading it, and obviously I identify with it because we've done such similar things. We've probably been in the same room at some point in time. But what didn't make the book? Because there's no way you ran out of stories before you ran out of pages. So what didn't make the book?
If you see my face behind this, you'll see a big smile in my face. A lot of things didn't make. A lot of things. So it's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I was trying to okay, how am I gonna first? I mean, I had to. This is the first book written by an operative, was in the unit. So the balance between national security, unit security, missions, guys in the unit doing, the current men and women who are serving, the former men and women who served in the unit. It's not an easy balance. So I had to really, and I know a lot of people want a lot of, war stories. I put as much as I can. The book went to DoD pre-publication approval. It was there for over a year. They took a lot of things out. We went back and forth. I sat with them for 4 hours. And I tried to balance, again, to walk this fine line between telling a good story, inspire people who they see here is this immigrant who came, reached the highest ranking in the enlisted rank in the military, was one of the best units in the military, and at the same time protect the national security. I do wanted to thank current and former unit leadership for helping with this process, JSOC security personnel, DoD security personnel. But yes, there are some stuff didn't make it in the book. If it would have made it in the book, I would have been able to tell you the story. Sorry, I can tell you the story. But good question, though. Good try.
Well, I wasn't trying to take anything classified, as everybody knows. But sometimes there's a funny anecdote. Like one time I had a source meet. This is in Johnny Walker's book, actually. And and you know how this works. We've been eating a lot of local food, even on the American camps. And I had a bad case of bad stomach. And this is my meeting. When it's your meeting, you're the boss. There's no rank. This is Pete's meeting. Everybody's working in service of me. And this guy is one of Saddam's former assassins. And we're talking, and I'm like, I have got to take a crap right now. And if I don't take a crap right now, I'm going to crap right now. And so in the middle of my meeting, I look at my friend, I'm like, I have got to go to the bathroom. You've got to cover me. And so he's like, you're leaving? I'm like, I don't have a choice. So I walked out. I left the little container where we had our office where we did meetings. And about 5 steps later, I pooed my pants. And so I had to go take a shower. I come back and I'm all wet with new clothes on. They're like, what happened? And I told them, I'm like, you have to translate this 100%. And I'm like, I walked out and I shit my pants because I had some bad Iraqi food. And and that moment made that guy, the source that we were working, it made him totally a different dude. He's like, you guys are cool, But these are the kind of things. Say it again.
We all human, right? When you show vulnerability, people see you as human more than a robot. Right. So it's part of leadership, part of humanity.
Yeah, and if they ever make his book into a movie, which I hope they do, I can't wait to interview the guy who plays me, because that would just be a riot. Hey, I've had you for an hour, and I don't want you any more than that because you got things to do. But is there anything you want to say in closing? Is there anything you want to ask me?
So actually, I have a lot of questions. I'll ask you most likely offline.
That's fine.
Because
that's fine.
We were in the same places at the same time. I worked for the AKICA, so you as a CI guy would know. Mm-hmm. I did work with some CI guys when I was in Germany before I even changed my MOS.
Sure.
They were working on some cool stuff.
We both have been to Bosnia.
Actually, they were doing things in North Africa.
I was saying we both have been to Bosnia, though. We have been.
Yeah, we've both been to Bosnia. Yeah. So there are things that we've done together. But what I want to highlight too is, before we close, actually, one of the main reasons I wrote the book is I wanted to tell a story about some of America's finest who are working in the shadow. And these guys don't get a lot of representations. Nobody talk about them. I know some of them are upset that I talked. But I wanted to let everybody know, like, I did protect everybody's identity, including mine. And the reason I'm protecting my identity as well is with social media now, people can connect the dots. So people can go and say, Adam worked with Pete, Pete worked with Jack, Jack worked with Dan, and then everybody's connected. So hopefully the book inspires some people. And to the immigrant community, hopefully they get to read the book. And if you make in America your new home, I would advise you to join the military protected. I'm not a recruiter. I'm not trying to recruit for the military, but I know the military done me well. It put me in a very good place in my life, and it put my family in a very good place. So thanks for the opportunity that I've been given from a great country.
This is great. All right, stand by. I'm right back to you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.